Good day, Grangers.
And welcome to the hall. I'm so excited for this episode
Yes.
today. I feel. Why don't you do a little bit of an introduction for Jessica? I know that you guys have a relationship.
We do, but I was going to let Jess introduce herself. But today we're joined by North Carolina Grange member Jessica Horton. She has come up through the Grange. I knew her from the youth program, what feels like many moons ago now. And now she is the communications director and public relations director for the North Carolina State Grange. So Jess, welcome. Do you want to give yourself a little brief bio?
Yeah, tell us about yourself.
Sure. I work for the North Carolina Grange, and I have, like you guys know, when you work in a nonprofit, you hold a lot of different roles. And so I was hired in '08, however many years ago that is now.
What, when you were 10 and a half? Like, geez Louise.
Yeah, exactly.
You look great.
I'm 40. So I was hired as the membership director. And as we all know, that is the hardest job on the planet. So I did that for several years. And then my background is actually in event management. I went to school for commercial rec, which oddly enough, I've never worked in commercial rec. I've always worked in nonprofit or government rec. So that kind of, we had somebody that did our events previously, and then she left. And so I got to kind of take that role. And so I still manage all of our state events. And if we travel for nationals, I'm the one who manages all of the flights and logistics of all of that. But I also do communications. I don't do all of them, but I do our magazine, and I do the majority of the emails that go out statewide. So yeah,
that's amazing.
That's kind of where I am.
Jessica, I think I met you at a Eastern Region Youth Conference in probably 2006 at some random campground in Asheville.
Maybe.
I think that was when I was our state youth ambassador at the time. And
okay.
And I don't remember much about that campground, but it was fun. It was a great regional conference.
No telling.
Who knows? Who knows where it was, what we did.
I've been involved with the Grange since I was like 9. So they all blur.
This is a great segue, because for some people don't understand that the Grange also has like youth and young. Can we just lay some groundwork there a little bit about what that looks like? Because like I think a lot of people just like, I mean, if they think of the Grange at all, they're going to think about like our ad advocacy and that sort of thing. So let's talk about what we do for the young folks. Like what do those programs look like? I don't know, whether Phil or Jessica, you want to handle that, but
I mean, I think I can speak for North Carolina. I can't necessarily speak nationwide, maybe like Phil can, but that's how I got the introduction, right? Because I'm part of a legacy family where I've had members forever and ever.
Do you know how far back your legacy goes?
I think only to my grandparents. I could tell you, I probably could pull out my little legacy form I got several years ago, because I filled it out. So I can't remember if it's my grandparents or great grandparents. But they were involved with the Grange, and then our summer camp program started. And my dad went to summer camp, and his best friends were from growing up in the Grange and going to summer camp. And one of those best friends was the youth director when I was growing up. And so he said, hey, you got to go to this summer camp. It's the best thing ever. And my parents dropped me off when I was 9. I knew nobody except him and fell in love with it. And so like our programming really revolves around summer camp here. That's how we get kids involved, how they want to stay involved. But then, we have leadership programs and different things that they can do as well that I subsequently went through also. So like I started out as a junior
and that's
went on
in the local Grange, right? So like
no, so this was at our state level.
Oh, it's state level.
Okay. Yeah. So like my local Grange growing up, there were a handful of kids there, but we mostly ran amok at the meetings. We weren't really, involved, I should say. Like they didn't ask us to do anything, and we didn't really want to do anything. So we relied heavily, and honestly still do, on the state programming.
Yeah, so nationally, I'll say the junior Grange programming runs for children 5 to 14. That being said, if you're a family and have kids younger than 5, they're always welcome in any junior Grange that I've been to, welcome to join in the programming. I happen to be both my state junior director and local junior director as well in Pennsylvania, because again, too many hats. So we're always welcoming of getting the full family involved in that way. And we also, at Pennsylvania, we're blessed to have a summer camp as well that is a fostering ground for people bring their friends for a year and then they join the junior Grange, and that's how they get in. So in the Grange, you can become a full member at 13 and a half, 14 is what we really say. But then we have this youth and young adult programming that now goes from nationally from age 14 to 30. And that's still this great way to encourage youth and young adult members to find their voice and to hone their leadership skills and to be able to step forward and be the next generation of leaders for the Grange while building these lifelong friendships and relationships. The number of Grange babies that I know now, because their parents met in youth programming at some point, whether it's in the state or at the national level, there are now so many Grange babies that it's kind of hard to believe that we're just kind of bringing a new generation in. I will say I was at a Pennsylvania youth event the other night as our state junior director, and the number of kids that were there who I went to camp with their parents is very strange now. It's like, I shouldn't be hanging out with you kids anymore. Like, the kids of my friends, right?
It's bizarre to like, we have kids that were on our state youth team being leaders or state president as a youth when I started in 08, 09, 10, and now they're married and have children. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm not old enough for this, right?
Mm. Wow.
And I have a 6-year-old, so like I'm right there with them.
She's
Yeah.
adorable.
So tell us a little bit, Jessica, about, obviously your legacy. So that means that you have, generationally been a part of the Grange, and your introduction was, really when you got involved was through summer camp. So tell us what what the history, like what it's looked like, how you've now become, the communications director for North Carolina, like fill in the blank.
Yeah, there's a gap there, right? So when I was living in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is kind of out at the coast, after college. And I don't know if I got a phone call or what, but at the time, our state fair had a tent that they called Our Land, Our Legacy. And the Grange had a booth in that tent. And they needed people to come and help work, right? Because it's a 10-day event for like 12 hours a day. It's a big deal. They needed a lot of help. And so I got a phone call from who is now our youth director, Jenny Gentry, and said, hey, could you come help? And I was like, yeah, sure. So I don't remember how much I worked, a shift or two. It wasn't a whole lot. So that was in October. And I had kind of stayed, involved. But at the time, our camp cutoff was 18. When you turned 18, you couldn't come back to camp. And now we go beyond that. We go through college. But so there was this like weird gap of time where it was like I was still a kid, but I wasn't an adult to be able to do things that I felt like were appropriate Grange related. So I kind of fell out for a few years. So this was probably like I was 23-ish, and I got that phone call to go work at the fair. And so I went and worked at the fair, and then fast forward about 4 months later, 3 months later, I get a call from Jimmy Gentry, who said, hey, we would love to have you come work for us. And would you be interested in interviewing? And I was like, yeah, I'm a broke college graduate. Absolutely. So I drove all the way across the state because at the time I was out at the coast and our state office is in Statesville, which is about, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours inland. So I drove, got the job, moved across the state, and I'm still here.
Awesome. Awesome. That's super awesome. So tell us about your local Grange. Like, I want to know, what does your local Grange look like? What's the history of your local Grange, if you know it? We got to get a shout out, the number shout out. What's your local Grange number?
I have a great number.
Oh.
And normally I don't know numbers. Like, I am not that person that knows Grange numbers. It's so funny to go to nationals and they're like, I'm a member of number, and I'm like, I don't know anybody's Grange number. But we are Grange number 1300.
Nice.
So I remember it.
Nice.
Because it is a nice round number.
Yes.
My Grange has a very brief history. because we started it in 21. Yes,
2021.
2021. Yes.
Okay.
So this is like such a convoluted story, but here we go.
Okay.
Um,
Buckle up.
I go to a church, right? That's like a mile from my house. And it's a big, like old Baptist church, but it's very progressive. Like we have a female pastor and, you know, not what you typically think of when you think of a Southern Baptist church at all.
Me
And
too.
yeah, so like I love it. It's not what I grew up Baptist, but not like that. I grew up Baptist, and this is Baptist. It's very different. And so
I love how the accent changed. That was perfect.
yes. So we're going to church, right? And we meet these wonderful people at our church. And I, over COVID, fell in love with flowers. And I was like, there's a tulip farm about an hour and a half from our house, and I love to go. It is one of my absolute favorite things to do is go to this tulip farm. But there's not one. I live in the city. I live right outside of Charlotte. Like there aren't tulip farms. And so I was like, man, this church has got a lot of land that ain't being used. I wonder if they let me plant flowers. I don't know anything about flowers, guys. I know nothing. I'm not a farm girl. And so I go to my friend Rachel, who I go to church with, and I say, hey, Rachel, what if they let me plant flowers? And she's like, well, you know, there used to be a big garden out there. And I was like, no, I didn't know that. And so she grabs her dad because she grew up in this church. Her parents go. And so she's like, Dad, tell Jessica about the garden that used to be here. And he's like, oh, yeah, it's great. You should have seen all the produce that came out of that garden and all the people we fed with all that food. And I was like, oh, okay. So then like my mind shift like switched. And I don't even know how this happened, but like somebody came to me and said, we should plant pumpkins. And I was like, how did I get here? I don't go from tulips to vegetables to pumpkin. I don't know what's happening. But literally within a week, I had like 3 different people look at me and be like, we should plant pumpkins. And I was like, are y'all talking? Like, I don't know what's happening. So we planted pumpkins. And I was like, you know, there should be some organization behind this. And so that is how our Grange started, was we planted pumpkins to be able to fund planting vegetables going forward. So like that's a very convoluted story of how that
and
started.
Let me ask you this question: does your Grange have a building? Like, is there a building?
No.
Okay.
We do
so
not.
Where do you meet?
On this lovely little thing called the internet. I mean, okay, we do meet at my house. Like, I could show you, like, I have a rack full of seeds that I could pull over because it's seed time now. And so people will come over and we start seeds and, you know, whatever. So yes, we do meet in person some, but a lot of what we deal with is via email and Zoom because we're all people my age roughly. We've all got little kids. We're all busy. Like I ain't got time to drive across town, talk to you when I can talk to you on here.
Well, and I think that that's so important. And Phil, I know I'm sorry I'm talking a lot today, but you know, I think that's so important because I think that the reality is that a lot of Granges are really stuck in. I'm stuck is maybe a bad word, but like the mentality around the building, right? And that it has to be a building and the building is important. And granted, like my Grange is that way. Like we are a building, we're a facility. Like that's what we are. Like we're a rental, you know, we're you know, an event rental place for the community. Like we have, you know, community events, like that sort of thing. And so a lot of what my Grange is about is the building. And so it's very cool and amazing to hear about the fact that you guys don't even have a building, but yet you're still planting. I mean, like we don't even plant stuff on our property and we've got property, you know, you're planting because you've got this space at the church. And I think that's amazing. Like that's so cool. So
I love it. I love that they didn't, I mean, and that's an interesting thing about our group, right? The only other person that's within our Grange as a member that has any kind of Grange history, which isn't much, is my husband. And so every other member has no concept of the fact that there are Granges with halls like that. That's right. What? That's weird. You have buildings. I don't understand. So to them, it's like a non-issue. They don't know any different, which is great.
So let me dive a little deeper in that because here's my question to that is like, why a Grange? Like, why did you guys decide to charter a Grange? Because that's, I mean, just so the internet knows and the world knows, like that's what happens. Like in order to start a Grange, you have to have, is it 15 people?
Or,
Four,
13,
14,
13,
13.
13, sorry.
I think it's,
We're
I
doing
think it's
bad
13.
here.
Yeah.
13 people. So 13 people, you know, in order to start the charter, you have to have that many members. Like, why would you guys say, instead of like, let's start a garden club at the church, right? Like, why would
Mhm.
you say, let's start a Grange?
Well, I think I'm the driving force behind that, right? Like I'm the one with the link between the church and the Grange because I have the knowledge of both. And so that's the only way my brain went, and nobody fought me on it. And so we just
Path
rolled
of least
with it.
resistance. I love it.
I like
Yes,
that you have like
exactly.
this symbiotic relationship though, because now you have these two organizations that are both doing good for the community in different ways. And so
Absolutely.
you have the Grange and you have the church, and working together between the two organizations is going to make them both stronger in the long run, rather than
Sure.
kind of being a
Yes.
subset
And
of
I
the.
think I will say the bureaucracy of the hoops that sometimes you have to jump through to make things happen, like just push forward through it because yes, I'm a church member and yes, I know the people that sit on the boards and do the things, but they still want to be like, what are you doing? I'm going to need that in writing. And I'm like, just let me plant the pumpkins. Right. But we drafted a lease and we signed it and we had a meeting. And so that little half acre is ours until we cease to exist. Like that's just the way we wrote it. And so, yes, there are some legalities there. And we talked about insurance and we talked about all those things too that you would think about when you have a building, but you also kind of have to think about when you use somebody else's property.
Yeah.
For sure. So I'm going to just jump in here and say that Jessica says knows nothing about flowers, but if you follow her on Instagram, she does do like these little tutorials on like, here's how I take care of my potted plants, and here's when I split them, and here,
Can we
like,
throw your Instagram handle out, Jessica?
I'm J Horton, Horton.
Okay.
Yes. So for the last 3
Following.
years, I have watched all of the YouTube that I could possibly watch, and then some. And every time, like if you guys watch any YouTube, you know who Garden Answer is. She's like the queen of the YouTube garden network. And I think I've watched every single thing she's put out in 3 years, and she puts a video out, I think, every single day. It's a lot of content.
That's a lot of content.
And so I've just educated myself. And yes, I do love flowers now, and I know a lot more about them than I did back
Was this your
in
COVID
those
hobby?
years.
Did I hear
What's
that
that?
correctly? That this was your COVID hobby? This is what came from COVID?
Yes, in a sense that like it happened because I was at home, but I think it would have naturally happened anyway. So like my history with that is my dad owned a garden center when I was growing up. And I wanted
Wait.
nothing to
Oh,
do with
I
it.
was like, wait. You can't say you don't know anything about flowers. Your dad owned a
No.
garden
I don't.
center.
I did not. I would get begrudgingly drug out there on Sunday afternoons, and I would have to handwrite tickets, and I didn't know anything about anything, and I didn't know prices of anything, and I was so frustrated. I get yelled at for watering things on the leaves instead of at the pot, and it was just not what I wanted to be doing as a 14-year-old girl on a Sunday afternoon. But it has served me well, all of that. But yes, I didn't know anything. And so I knew that you put tulip bulbs in the ground in the fall and you prayed. That's what I knew. So
Bro.
I know a lot more now, and I've actually gone back to school for horticulture. So it's just,
Of course you have.
when I say I snowball, I snowball.
I understand. I snowball too. I get it. I completely get it. So I want to know right now in your Grange, obviously you said you're growing pumpkins to do fundraiser, to be able to do gardening, to grow food. So where are we at? Like, tell me what's going on in your Grange today.
So currently, the field is a mess. It needs to be plowed. And we have some lovely gentlemen at church who volunteer their little tractor, and they will come over to the church and plow for us. And
let's talk about when, because we might not be releasing this right away.
Oh,
we're in,
sure.
We're in March of 2024, right?
Yes. So roughly within the next month, that'll get turned over with the plow. Okay. And all of the little seed babies that are sitting next to me will get planted. Roughly, I'm in zone now 8A. I was 7B. They switched things up on us this year. Zones changed because we keep getting hotter. So roughly tax day is our planting day, and we will put out, we've got like 4 different varieties of tomatoes over there, okra, which if y'all ain't from the South, y'all don't know what okra is.
I lived in Dallas for 17 years. I know what okra is.
I know what
Okay.
okra is, and y'all can keep it. That's just
You gotta fix it right or it's not good. I'll tell you
Yeah.
that. We have flowers because I've become a big believer in the pollinator, and so I always put flower seeds out. Like last year, we just did we let the kids go out with packets of zinnias and just let them go, and they just planted the zinnias, and we're like, great. And they did some sunflowers too, because you can't really mess that up. So yeah, roughly a month, 6 weeks from now, all that stuff will go in, and then it'll be time to pull the weeds.
And then what's the plan for what are you going to do with all this stuff once it's
So,
grown?
okay, so there's 2 avenues. The majority of what we have done previously goes to a place called Angels and Sparrows, and it happens to be across the street from our church. And they run they do like lunch every day. They serve lunch, but they also have like a little market. And so we've a lot of what we've done in the past is cherry tomatoes. They go gangbusters for us. So we donate buckets of cherry tomatoes, and they will put them on salads for lunch. And then whatever's left over, they will put in the little market for people to come and get at their convenience and shop. Outside of that, our church does Saturday morning breakfast every single Saturday through the summer, and anybody can come and eat breakfast. And they do all kinds of stuff they'll have set out to give away. So like they'll have bread from like a local baker, and they'll have magazines and all kinds of stuff. And so we have taken them squash to give out as well. Aside from those 2 things that we've done previously, right? So like we have a trench dug for water for the garden, and the water actually runs off of a place called Lydia's Loft. And Lydia's Loft is run by our church, but it's a separate entity, and it's like a closet, right? So you can get a referral to come and shop. And from what I've been told, when there was a previous garden, they would take stuff there and the shoppers would come and get it. And that people have since asked, are you guys going to do the garden again? We miss being able to come and get vegetables here too. So if we have a good, season, then we'll take stuff there too.
awesome.
That is amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
So, do you guys do anything else as a Grange besides this garden, or is this garden the whole focus?
That's pretty much it. It is a big undertaking.
Oh
so.
yeah, not to take away from it.
Right
I
now,
joke all the time
that's
that
it.
I am not agriculturally minded. My yard is survival of the fittest. Like this is not like the fact that I'm involved in an ag organization is laughable to most people who know me. So yeah, no, I'm not saying it's not hard work, because I know it is. So
don't feel bad. I mean, I'm a city girl. I live,
we have a suburban Grange. That's what I was saying. I was like,
I love it. So do we. Yeah.
And I grew up as a country boy, and I know
Yeah.
nothing about gardening. I have houseplants that I am surprised have lasted the month and a half that they've been at my house. Like they're not mine. I didn't start them. I didn't raise them. They have ended up at my house through chance.
Acquired them.
Yes. And so I'm like Googling every day. I'm like, do I need to water this? Like there's a feature on Google Images that like you can search like when there's like a brown spot on your leaf. You're like, what is this? And it will tell you like you might want to water that, or don't water that, or you should probably move that away from the window because it's 30 degrees outside, dum-dum.
Yeah. Well, I think with like talking about like the history of the Grange and like where the Granges come from, like I just like my mind is kind of blown, Jessica. I didn't know any of this information about your Grange, and so I think it's so cool to see this perspective from what can be, because your Grange is so new, and it's such a different model than most of the Granges. I mean, and Phil, you can talk about that, I'm sure, but like it's a different model than what a lot of the Granges are, because like I said, my Grange is centered around the building, what the building is, what we do with the building, and that sort of thing. And so the fact that there is no building, but yet you guys like you have a program that gives back to the community, like that's mind-boggling. And how cool that other people in other parts of the country, you don't have to have a building, people. Like you can start a Grange. Like you can start a Grange, and with this community service mind, which is what I feel like the Grange is all about, right? Is like, and how do you do that? How do you, I mean, obviously you told us like how you did it. So I think that's really cool. And then I don't know, Phil, are there other Granges throughout the US that have started recently or look like this, that are like very, remote based as far as like they don't have a building, they meet via Zoom,
I don't know for sure. I'm sure there are. The
people
the
are going to be writing us
ability
like, we are.
the ability to meet via Zoom was just approved in 2019. It was
Mhm.
a presidential proclamation from Betsy Huber at the time, who said, let's embrace technology and allow members who can't physically be at your meetings to call in, to Zoom in, to use this technology. And thank God we did, like not knowing the pandemic was coming
Gonna happen. Yeah.
6 months later, 5 months later from that convention that was released. And that allowed the Grange to continue to work through the pandemic, where so many other organizations hadn't thought ahead to the ability to meet virtually or to work virtually. And we already had approved it and allowed it, and said, and some Granges were already doing it even before it was allowed.
Mhm.
So I'm sure there are other Granges that meet like this. And there is still very much the traditional mindset of we have to go to the hall to do any of our business. But then I know for my Grange, I'm on the phone 3 or 4 times a week, not like whipping votes or anything like that, but like ensuring that we're all on the same page and we're all working together, because we live in a fast-paced society now, much faster than in, the late 1800s, where things have to happen between meetings. Now, there was a time where many Granges met 2 or 3 times a month, and we're now, most Granges are down to once a month, if that. They're supposed to, but um, it's interesting to see how Granges are adapting to technology and letting it guide the work, and letting, instead of saying we always have to be together to do things, let's embrace it and use the technology that we have to allow us to move forward without feeling held up by anything.
Yeah, I
And
think that's
I,
such a great way to look at it, because it's so hard to pigeonhole yourself into saying, no, you have to go and you have to meet. And you're going to turn a lot of people off if that is the way you operate, especially people in my demographic.
and let's also talk about the fact, I'm curious because it just occurred to me, do you guys do floor work? Like, what does that look like? I mean, let's talk about that. Like, there's a whole ceremony for people who aren't Grangers. There's a whole ceremony that happens, opening and closing the Grange, with the business meetings sandwiched in between. It's like, how do you conduct that in a Zoom, environment?
We don't. I mean, I'm 100% honest with you, and that's just, we don't.
Well, and I think what you said about being a turnoff to the demographic, I think that that's really an important distinction, because I think, I'm 43, you said you were 40. Like, I think for the younger people that are younger than us, like our age and younger than us, like, I think that the ceremony, unless you were raised in Grange, is kind of a hard pill to swallow sometimes when you're not familiar with it and don't understand the meaning behind it and why it's there and that sort of thing. And so if your first introduction is you walk into a hall and this, the ritual starts, it's like, oh, what did I just walk into? Because that's the way I felt the first time I sat down in the Grange. You know what I mean? And I thankfully am open-minded enough that I was like, okay, let me take a pause in this and like do some research and understand like what's going on here. But there's a lot of people that won't do that. They'll just be like, this is not for me. I'm going to walk out of here and never come back. And so I guess it's encouraging to me to hear about, like, there are Granges that are, not that it's not important, and not that the ritual is not important. That's not what I'm saying, but that we can also be flexible enough in that, if that's not part of what the Grange structure is where you're at, that's okay. And like, you can still be a Grange and you can still survive and thrive and all those things. So I think that's really important.
For sure. I think it's interesting though, because when we elected officers, I give everybody the rundown of what everybody is, in charge of, and kind of what these roles look like. And, you have your essential, you have to elect officers, right? And then you have like the secondary, tertiary level. And so one of those secondary, tertiary level is your gatekeeper, right?
Right.
And we have a member, his name's Steven. And when I'm going, because I go through all the lists, and he's like, well, I want to be gatekeeper. I said, fantastic.
Yeah.
you can be
Boop,
gatekeeper
you're
/
gatekeeper.
greeter. Yes, because he was like, there's an owl. I want to be the owl. I was like, you got it, man.
Now people are Googling right now, just so you know. There are people in the world that are Googling like
Yes.
gatekeeper, owl, like Grange. What's going on?
Which is
What's going
also
on here?
very similar to the office of the Sentinel in FFA.
Yes.
So
So yeah, if you Google, if you don't want to Google, I'll save you the Google, and it is just basically your greeter, your person who welcomes everybody.
Right.
You know,
In
that's
my Grange, we call them the greeter. That's, I mean,
Yes.
that's, we
In the-
don't use the term gatekeeper, but we use greeter. But that's, I
in the
mean, that is what
history
it
of the
is, right?
Grange, in the history of the Grange, the gatekeeper actually sat in a room
at the door.
outside of the meeting room
Right.
and like was the initial person who
Password.
would
Yeah.
collect the password initially and then knock on the door to alert the people inside that somebody new was coming in. And like there was
And there are still Granges that use that person in that way. And so I just want to put that out there. Like, I think that there's a full spectrum here. And I think that that's so important for the public, the outside public, to understand about the Grange, is that there is a full spectrum. There are Granges that are like Jessica's Granges that do none of the ritual. They meet virtually, they don't have a hall. But then there are other, on the complete flip side, antithesis of the spectrum is there are Granges that still have that antechamber that the gatekeeper sits in and collects a password from every single person that walks in. And there's historical meaning and value behind that. And I'm not saying like they're going to turn you away at the door if you don't know the password. Like, that's not the way this works. Like, it's, I'm just saying like that they continue with the ritual because of the importance that it lends to their Grange and their culture. And that's what's so cool about the Grange, is it can be all things, so.
Absolutely. I think that's where, like, for me, summer camp played a huge role, because that is one of the big things we do at our summer camp, is to teach the kids how to run a meeting. And then they kind of get it, and they don't expect it at a local Grange if they attend one. But then when they come to our state meeting and they see that same kind of business meeting being run, or they go on to nationals and see that business being run, it's not foreign to them. It's not like, what is this? They have a little bit of history behind it, and they understand where they might not have if they had not been to summer camp with us.
That's very cool. I think for me, like, Phil, I don't know if you have other questions for Jessica. Like, I just kind of want to hear about, where you sit in the world of Grange, like what you see as the future for the Grange. How do we keep this going for the next generation, for our kids? Because I have a 9 and a 4-year-old. So like, I'm with you with this. Like, I've got little kids, they're seeing me work within the Grange now. How do we keep this going so that this can be alive for them when they, grow up and have Grange babies? So weird to think about my kids having Grange babies.
Weird.
I
Maybe.
know. Yeah. Ooh, yeah. I just feel like I aged 20 years.
I'm sorry.
I think obviously the reason that my Grange started is because there was a common goal. And if you get people together that have a common goal, and you can put an organization name behind it that makes sense. I'm not saying the Grange always makes sense, but in our case, obviously it did. And I've done this model previously when I was membership director. When you get a group of people together that have a common goal or a common interest, it's easy to say, okay, well, you want to do XYZ. Well, if we put a name behind it, then we've got some backing. And in North Carolina, I know that we are a unique situation, and that other states are not like us as far as funding goes. I am not blind to that. But that is a really big help. So in our state, when you
I was gonna
start
say, what do you mean by
Grange,
that? Can you explain what that means?
yeah. So,
Okay.
okay, well, let me back up. In North Carolina, we are primarily funded by Blue Cross Blue Shield. We have an insurance program. So that's how I'm paid. I'm not paid through dues. But because of that, we offer financial assistance to new Granges. So you get a $500 check when you charter a Grange that's written to that local Grange. So that can help you seed whatever that common interest project thing that you've all gotten together to do can then, go forward. Where I feel like a lot of Granges, they were like, they look at each other and they sit around and they're like, okay, we started a Grange. Now what?
Now what?
Yeah, it's like you almost need to put the cart before the horse. You've and figure out your end goal a little bit to get that interest going. I think that really helps drive things. And then from a kid's perspective, my kid now loves to go out and pick the cherry tomatoes. And when she sees that I'm interested in it, she wants to be involved. There's nothing like having a little kid that wants to be under your feet all the time. And when they see that you're interested in something, they want to be interested in it too. And they want to learn and understand. And yeah, if you got a teenager, they might not care so much, but they'll come back to you. I kind of
Right.
feel like that way about church. You know, when you're a little kid, you go to church,
I
you
I
go,
was gonna equate it to church, like all along
yeah,
this conversation. I'm like, well, that's kind of like church. Well, that's kind of like church. That's kind of like church.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you go because your parents make you go and you're involved and do the things, and then you get to go off to college and do whatever you want to do. And then it's like all of a sudden you're a married adult and you've got a kid, and it's like, well, I want them to grow up and feel that way about the things that I dealt with as a kid. And so it's this cycle, right? And I feel it's the same way with an organization like we are. I want my kid to have the experience I had at summer camp. I want my kid to have the experience I had when I got to travel and I got to go to regional meetings, and now I get to go to national meetings, and the opportunities that are there and the networking that exists and the relationships you form are so important. And I want my kid to see that, and then I want her to be a part of it.
Mm. And the evolution, I think, is, I think that that's something that, like, just to lay that out, like, I think that it's so amazing, and you're probably a prime example of like what the evolution of Grange can look like. It doesn't have to just be stagnant, right? Like, it can evolve. It can evolve. It can be what the next iteration needs to be. And I think that idea of a common goal, because I joined a Grange that was a longstanding Grange that was really had become listless. Other than the fact that it was a rental property, there wasn't really a common goal, and we kind of united behind a common goal of being a community organization that had events for our community, to draw our community, and especially after COVID, like bringing people back in person, which is such a struggle right now for a lot of organizations. But that's my Grange, and like that, and our Grange can do us because of the community we're in, whereas like your Grange can do you because of the community you're in. So I just really appreciate your perspective. Like, I think it's really cool perspective. So.
And I think that the ability to be flexible and forward thinking and is really important to say, like, yes, this is who we are and where we came from, but this is also where we need to go. And
Yeah.
so many people forget to look forward, and they get stuck in the immediate needs and don't think far enough ahead to say, what are we planning for? What does the next generation look like? So to form a Grange that is a virtual Grange that does have property, that does have a purpose, I think is a really neat way to kind of blend the past and the future, and to realize that we are going to go somewhere, and at some point the property might not be ours, but we can still exist. I think.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having grown up in a very traditional Grange that had a building and still has a building, they still operate, you know, and to come away from that. And I know a big part of my experience is because I work for the Grange and I see all sides of it and how it can be incorporated. But to know that just because you came out of a Grange that has a really traditional backing doesn't mean you have to go forward with that. If you leave that Grange, or if that Grange wants to migrate into something else, you can change and evolve and recreate yourself. It's okay.
And then you have the backing of the national organization. Like, I guess I want to put that
Absolutely.
out there for people who don't understand, like, why would you choose to charter a Grange? Well, then you have the backing of the entire organization when you choose to charter. And so, like, that is, that honestly, and I think that that's a lot of what we want to get out through the podcast too, is that people understand, like, yes, there is a national Grange. It has its purpose, but like that filters down to each Grange locally too, because it is the backing, it is the foundation of the local Grange. So
It also gives you a structure in some ways to say, like, so many fledgling nonprofits start and don't have a structure of how they're going to operate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the really great thing to use the Grange, and while the Grange isn't for everyone and can't be everyone's solution for a nonprofit,
No.
it certainly has a structure and a way that we operate within the business meeting, is set, like, to say we know how this works, and to give people the groundwork or the plan to say, here's how you can move forward and here's how we operate. And I think that's the neat thing, is like, even though our three Granges look incredibly different from each other, we all are operating within the same structure in our own way. And I think that's what makes the Grange unique, is that we allow that to happen too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be really difficult to go to a new group of people and they say, well, what do you do? Tell me about the Grange. And I'm like, how many minutes you have?
Well,
Because it
and
can be
that's
really
always a question.
overwhelming.
yeah, and because I didn't grow up in the Grange, you know, which people who have listened to the podcast know that because I've talked about it a little bit, but it's like I didn't grow up in the Grange. People ask me all the time, like, what is the Grange? Like people, you know, I interface with like, what is a Grange? And I'm like, oh gosh, yeah, like how much time do you have? Because it is different things to different people, and like, how do I even get that? You know, what's my 30-second elevator speech? It's not like 30 seconds.
No. And I feel like it changes every time I give it.
Yeah,
Depends who I'm
depending
giving
on who
it
you're
to.
giving it to, right?
Or where
Yeah.
I am. Like my elevator speech in Harrisburg looks a little different, which is Pennsylvania's capital for those who don't know. Looks a little different than it does here in Williamsport where I live. Like the people that I'm working with and the message that I'm trying to get across to, whether it's a legislator or somebody in our community, there's a different way that I talk about the Grange too. And
Yeah.
Absolutely. A lot of my job revolves around going and working expos.
Mhm.
And I talk to people all day long. And if I'm talking to a teenager, it is very different from when I'm talking to somebody who's in their 50s.
Yeah. Wow. This was a great conversation.
It is a great conversation. I know. I'm like, my mind's kind of blown right now. I had no idea that this is where it was going to go. So I love it. And I didn't know. I mean, Jessica and I have met a couple times virtually, but I had no idea that was, you know, that was her story. So I thank you so much. I'm so appreciative of you taking your time to come on and talk to us. Talk to us about your Grange.
But don't tell your boss that
Absolutely.
you weren't working for this hour, so because this counts.
What did
Right,
you say, Phil?
I said, don't tell our boss that she wasn't working for this hour, that she was with.
Who? Me?
This is work.
No,
I don't know if you knew this, but this is work.
That's right.
It's my job.
It's important. It's very important. Like I think it's important to get these stories out. So yeah, I just really appreciate you.
I love that the groups that I have become a part of nationally look like this, right? We're all very different and we all operate very independently, but we have such
different. No, I'm just kidding.
But we have such common interests, right? And with this organization.
But our community is our common interest. Like that's the really interesting thing is that like for me, like my driver is my community and my community looks different than your community, but we still love our communities, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and even though my community is in, you know, Western Washington State in the suburbs of Tacoma, Washington, like, and it looks totally different than, you know, where you're sitting, like, I still love my community and you love your community. And we could base ourselves in that love and that, you know, that desire to be the best thing we can for our community. So.
Absolutely. And I was in Tacoma, Washington, like 3 weeks ago.
What? And you didn't call me?
I rode right through on a train.
I'll forgive you. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, Jessica, thank you for being with us today. This was a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to hearing people's feedback on this. So if you have a virtual Grange, if you're one of those people who's out there meeting virtually, please let us know. We'd love to talk to you. Learn more about the way that, you know, not Granges without a physical location, how you operate. Because my background is fully physical, more or less. So, yeah. Any
my limited background is also physical. So,
well, thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, we'll talk to you again soon for other plans, but
sure.
Well, thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time at the hall.
Bye.
The Grange Hall Podcast is a production of the National Grange, all rights reserved. If you have comments or questions, or if you'd like to recommend a member of your Grange to be featured, you can contact us at grangehallpod@gmail.com.